Welcome to the ultimate hub for cartoon movie lovers. Whether you're into timeless classics or the newest releases, this is your place for detailed recaps and engaging reviews. Today, we're covering the thrilling sci-fi action movie Riddick. This intense story is full of surprises, so let's jump right in. The story begins on a distant, desolate planet, teeming with dangerous, predatory creatures. The environment is harsh, the skies are gloomy, and the ground is littered with ruins, an unforgiving wasteland. Amidst this chaos, one of the creatures prowls through the rubble, its sharp claws scraping the terrain as it searches for prey. Its movement is calculated, its eyes fixed on what appears to be a lifeless human hand partially buried beneath the rubble. As the creature cautiously approaches, the hand suddenly springs to life. It grabs the creature's throat with an iron grip. The creature thrashes, gasping for breath, and cries out, "Let me go! I'm dying! I'm dying!" Moments later, its struggles cease, and it collapses to the ground, lifeless. Emerging from the rubble is Riddick, battered and disoriented but very much alive. His leg is mangled, a bloody and twisted mess, but his sharp gaze sweeps the area with fierce determination. His iconic bald head gleams faintly even in the dim light, a strange contrast to his dire circumstances. Despite the pain, Riddick drags himself across the rocky terrain, his breathing labored as he fights to find shelter. After hours of painful crawling, Riddick discovers a cave. He collapses inside, temporarily safe from the predators lurking outside. For a brief moment, he allows himself to rest, tending to his injured leg with makeshift tools. Each movement is slow and deliberate, his face contorted in pain as he fights to stabilize the damage. But his respite is short-lived. A low growl echoes through the cave, followed by the sound of claws scraping against stone. Riddick turns his head just in time to see a dog-like creature charging at him, its sharp teeth bared and ready to attack. Startled, Riddick reacts instinctively. He uses his legs to kick the creature away, but it's relentless. Spotting a sharp piece of metal nearby, he grabs it, hurls it at the creature, and shouts, "Catch!" The creature instinctively chases the shard, giving Riddick a moment to regroup. However, the danger is far from over. Later, the same dog returns, this time with its entire pack. Their growls fill the air, and their eyes glint with predatory intent as they close in on the cave. Riddick hides in the shadows, his breathing shallow and controlled. The tension is thick as the pack prepares to attack. But before they can strike, a massive creature emerges from the water within the cave. It grabs one of the dogs and drags it into the depths. The remaining dogs, terrified by the sight, flee into the night, leaving Riddick in silence once more. As the chaos subsides, Riddick rests under a weathered statue inside the cave. Its crumbling features seem to tell a story of a forgotten time. As he stares at the figure, memories flood his mind, taking us back to his past. We learn that Riddick once ruled an entire planet. He rose to power by defeating King Marshall, as per the customs of that world. Kill the ruler and you become the new king. Under his rule, Riddick established dominance and order. But his trusted army commander Zako harbored ambitions of his own. One day, Zako approached Riddick with a tempting offer. "I've found your home planet," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "The one you've been searching for all these years." Riddick's eyes lit up with rare joy. "Are you serious? After all this time? I owe you for this, Zako. Take me there immediately." Feigning loyalty, Zako arranged for Riddick's journey. But upon arrival, Riddick quickly realized he had been deceived. This was not his home planet. It was a hostile wasteland, crawling with deadly creatures. Zako abandoned him there, leaving him to die. To make matters worse, he left Riddick in the company of Jackson, a deformed man tasked with ensuring his demise. Jackson wasted no time, drawing his weapon and aiming it at Riddick. But Riddick, ever resourceful, grabbed a handful of sand and said, "For the first time, sand will end your lives." He used the sand to blind Jackson and his men, swiftly killing them one by one. Jackson, desperate to gain the upper hand, fired at the ground beneath Riddick, causing the edge to collapse. Riddick plummeted into the depths below, disappearing from sight. Believing him dead, Jackson left the planet. But Riddick survived. As we saw in the opening scene, he emerged from the rubble, battered but alive, and began the arduous process of adapting to his new environment. Riddick's journey of survival began with capturing one of the pups from the pack that had attacked him earlier. Over time, he raised the pup, finding companionship and loyalty in the lonely, hostile world. Together, they navigated the planet's many dangers, forming an unbreakable bond. To ensure their survival, Riddick injected both himself and the pup with small doses of scorpion venom. This calculated move built their immunity, ensuring they wouldn't fall victim to the planet's venomous creatures. Days turned into weeks, and the pup grew into a strong, dependable dog. One day, the dog howled at the sky, a warning of an impending storm. Riddick looked up, understanding the gravity of the signal. Heavy rain was coming, and with it, a new wave of danger. Ferocious creatures that would rise from the ground. Determined to survive, Riddick and the dog walked for hours, eventually stumbling upon an abandoned space station. Inside, Riddick found a transmitter. With a flicker of hope, he devised a plan. He would send out a distress signal, lure a spaceship to the planet, and use it to escape. Riddick activated the transmitter, sending out a signal that reached far beyond the desolate planet. What followed was a chain of events that would test his survival skills like never before. As the distress signal from the transmitter transmitter reached nearby space, Zako, the man who betrayed Riddick, learned that his former target was still alive. Furious, Zako put out a bounty of $10 million on Riddick's head and sent a team of ruthless mercenaries to the planet. Their leader, Santa, was as greedy as he was ruthless, willing to do whatever it took to claim the reward. The mercenaries' ship landed on the planet near the space station. Santa, confident in his abilities, led his team toward the transmitter. Upon arrival, they found a message from Riddick, scrawled ominously for them to see. It read, "If you want to live, leave your ship and get out now." Santa, unimpressed by the warning, laughed and said, "He thinks he's clever. Let's see how clever he is when I find him." To ensure Riddick couldn't steal their ship, Santa ordered his men to remove the ship's battery and lock it in a safe. Meanwhile, a captive woman was dragged off the ship. Santa shoved her forward and said cruelly, "You're free to go." But as soon as she took a few steps, he pulled out his weapon and shot her in cold blood. Her lifeless body hit the ground as Santa smirked. "That should get his attention," he said, knowing Riddick was watching. From a distance, Riddick observed the scene with a mix of anger and disgust. His body tensed, his fists clenched, but he didn't make a move. Yet, shortly after, another ship arrived, carrying a second group of mercenaries. Their leader, Johns, had a personal vendetta against Riddick. "He killed my son," John said, his voice heavy with emotion. Santa, seeing competition, scoffed, "I got here first. I'll kill Riddick and take the reward." Johns shook his head. "I'm not here for the bounty. I want answers. I want to know why he killed my son." Night fell, and the mercenaries set up camp near the space station. Their equipment, state-of-the-art and precise, scanned the area for any sign of Riddick. Suddenly, the devices picked up movement. A dog. "It's just a mutt," Santa dismissed, waving his hand. But this was no ordinary dog. It was Riddick's loyal companion, and it had a mission. The dog snuck into the camp and stole a crucial control device before running back to Riddick. With the device in hand, Riddick disabled the mercenaries' equipment, plunging their camp into chaos. Santa, annoyed but unshaken, barked orders to his men. "The devices are down. Looks like we're hunting the old-fashioned way." Johns, ever cautious, warned Santa about possible traps around the area, but Santa, arrogant and dismissive, waved him off. "Traps? Please, he's just one guy." Moments later, one of Santa's men triggered a trap, dying instantly. Santa, now visibly shaken, ordered his remaining men to retreat to the camp. "We'll regroup in the morning," he said, trying to mask his fear. The next day, the two groups of mercenaries argued over their next move. Santa, determined to assert his dominance, came up with a new plan. He attached a GPS tracker to Riddick's dog, hoping it would lead them to its owner. They followed the dog to Riddick's cave but found no sign of him. Frustrated and confused, they decided to return to their camp. Little did they know, Riddick had already infiltrated the camp and accessed the safe. He left a note that read, "I have the ship's battery. If you want to live, give me a ship." When Johns read the note, he was shocked. Santa, however, laughed and said, "Don't worry, the key is with me." Johns snapped, "Then what are you waiting for? Open it." Santa opened the safe and found the batteries exactly where they were supposed to be, or so he thought. Moments later, a noise distracted them. They left the safe unattended to investigate, giving Riddick the perfect opportunity to strike. By the time they returned, the batteries were gone. Santa was livid. "Without those batteries, we're stuck here," he shouted. Johns, realizing the gravity of the situation, said, "We need him alive. He's the only one who knows where the batteries are." Later, Riddick approached them himself. He walked into the camp with his usual confidence and said, "Let's make a deal. If I sense any betrayal, you'll regret it. I have the batteries, and if I die, you'll never leave this planet." Johns, intrigued, asked, "What's the deal?" Riddick replied, "Give me a ship and I'll give you the batteries. Take it or leave it." Santa, seething with rage, said, "No way. We're not making deals with him." Riddick shrugged. "Fine. You've got one day to decide." As Riddick turned to leave, Santa saw an opportunity to strike. He pulled out his weapon, intending to shoot Riddick in the back, but before he could fire, Riddick's dog lunged at him, biting into his shoulder. Enraged, Santa shot the dog, killing it instantly. Riddick, filled with fury and heartbreak, tried to fight back, but Santa had him drugged and tied up on the ship. As Riddick had regained consciousness, he noticed it had begun raining. The rain signaled the arrival of the ferocious underground creatures. Santa, oblivious to the growing threat, gloated, "Finally, I've got you. $10 million is as good as mine." Before Santa could finish Riddick off, the creatures arrived. Their monstrous forms appeared on the mercenaries' scanners, striking fear into everyone. Santa and his men scrambled to lock the doors, but the creatures were relentless. Amid the chaos, Riddick seized his chance. With a well-timed kick, he knocked Santa down and grabbed a weapon. He killed Santa in a swift, brutal move. Turning to Johns, Riddick said, "You're the only one here with half a brain. Untie me, and I'll help us get off this planet." Johns reluctantly agreed, and the two formed a tense alliance. Together, they retrieved the batteries and fought their way through the creatures. Riddick and Johns fought their way through the relentless waves of creatures, but the odds were overwhelming. Their ammunition ran low, and the creatures seemed to grow more aggressive with every passing moment. Despite the chaos, they pressed on, determined to survive. The two mercenaries found a pair of motorcycles at the camp, using them to make a desperate dash toward the hidden location of the ship's batteries. As the engines roared to life, the creatures pursued them, their screeches piercing the air. Riddick, despite still feeling the effects of the drugs Santa used on him, fought to stay focused. After a grueling ride, they reached the spot where Riddick had and buried the batteries. He quickly began digging with his hands, every second feeling like an eternity as the creatures closed in. Finally, he unearthed the batteries and handed them to Johns. But just as they prepared to leave, one of the mercenaries, Diaz, revealed his true colors. "Hand them over," Diaz demanded, his weapon trained on Johns and Riddick. "What are you doing, Diaz?" Johns asked, his tone sharp with disbelief. Diaz smirked. "The reward's too tempting to split. I'll take the batteries and turn you both in." Before Diaz could act, Riddick lunged at him. The two engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand battle. Diaz, fueled by greed, fought ruthlessly, but Riddick's survival instincts gave him the edge. With a final, brutal move, Riddick delivered a fatal blow to Diaz, leaving him lifeless on the ground. But Diaz managed to get one last act of sabotage. Before he died, he fired at the motorcycles, disabling them. With their transport destroyed, Riddick and Johns were left with no choice but to continue on foot. Riddick looked at Johns and said, "Stay sharp. From here on, it's going to get worse." Together, they grabbed their weapons and began the treacherous journey back to the ship. The creatures were relentless, their numbers growing as Riddick and Johns fought their way through. Each encounter pushed them closer to exhaustion. Riddick, still weakened from the drug, began to falter. His movements slowed, and his breathing grew heavier. Finally, his body gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. Johns, clutching the batteries, hesitated. He looked at Riddick, torn between self-preservation and guilt. After a moment of internal struggle, Johns chose to leave Riddick behind and make his way to the ship alone. As Johns disappeared into the distance, Riddick dragged himself to the edge of a nearby mountain. The creatures swarmed around him, their sharp teeth and claws ready to strike. Riddick, summoning the last of his strength, prepared to defend himself. He fought valiantly, but the sheer number of creatures overwhelmed him. Just as the creatures were about to deliver the final blow, a deafening sound filled the air. Gunfire erupted, driving the creatures back. Riddick, barely clinging to consciousness, looked up to see the spaceship hovering above him. Johns had returned. The ship's doors opened, and Johns stepped out, firing at the creatures to clear a path for Riddick. He shouted, "Get up! We're not leaving without you!" With renewed determination, Riddick staggered to his feet and made his way to the ship. Once aboard, he collapsed into a seat, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. Johns tended to Riddick's wounds as the ship ascended. "You killed my son," Johns said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I need to know why." Riddick, his voice faint but steady, lied. "I didn't kill him, I swear." But deep down, both men knew the truth. Once Riddick recovered enough to move, he prepared to leave. "Thank you," he said to Johns, his tone sincere but guarded. "Don't thank me," Johns replied. "Just make sure this ends with you." Riddick took the ship and returned to his planet. Upon landing, he was greeted by Jackson, the man who had betrayed him and left him to die. "You're back?" Jackson sneered. "Why didn't you stay buried?" Riddick's eyes burned with fury. "Where's Zako?" Jackson laughed. "Zako's gone. Fako took over after you, and now he's in the underworld, executing his plan to control the entire universe." Riddick's hand moved like lightning, drawing a knife and plunging it into Jackson's chest. "Betray me once. Shame on you. Betray me twice. Well, you don't get that chance." As Jackson fell lifeless to the ground, Riddick turned his gaze toward the underworld. His eyes narrowed with determination. "This isn't over," Riddick muttered. "Not by a long shot. With this, the movie ends." If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.